right, and I am done with all of my Christmas cards, and I'm back. By the way, I actually really hate Christmas cards. I'm like, just give me the money, give me the gifts and all like the good stuff. You're gonna throw it away anyway, but my grandma likes it, so there we go. All right, it's Christmas time, and who doesn't love Christmas? The presents, the lights, the treats, the 2-week break from school. Everyone finds joy in different places this time of year. Am I right? There's a really popular Christmas movie. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's the movie Elf, where Buddy the Elf gets so excited because he hears, Santa's coming! I know him! Sometimes when it comes to the excitement of Christmas, I feel like Buddy the Elf. Santa! My favorite thing to do every Christmas is make a lemon pound cake with my dad. This cake is so good. It takes like maybe an hour and a half to bake. And while it's baking, the smell fills the entire house. And while it's baking, we're making the icing and we're putting real lemon juice and real sugar in it. I mean, we can make lollipops out of this icing. It's so good. And then when the cake is done, it's gone in like 15 minutes. Okay. When someone asks you what Christmas is all about, chances are you probably answer Jesus. And you're right. Christmas is about celebrating the arrival of Jesus into the world and into our lives. But even though we know what the right answer is it what we really truly think about or feel when it comes to Christmas? I think for a lot of us, Christmas may be less about Jesus and more about us. Think about it. The countdown to Christmas can feel more like a countdown to school being let out, sleeping later in the mornings, and spending time playing video games or hanging out with friends. We get so excited to make our list of gifts that we want and things we want to do during the season. We fill our time with shopping and decorations and activities. And before we know it, we've forgotten to include room in our busy Christmas schedules for the one thing or person that Christmas is all about. Jesus. Believe me, I get it. I love a good Christmas tree decorating session as much as anybody. I love to fill my calendar full of holiday fun every year. And don't even get me started on the presents. The truth is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with any of those things. They're fun parts of a special season. But the problem comes in when we focus Christmas so much on ourselves that we forget to find joy in who Christmas is all about. But honestly, it's been this way since the birth of Jesus. In fact, there was a guy who was a part of the very first Christmas story in the Bible who took this idea of being the center of the story to the extreme. He was a guy we don't talk about that often. A guy who didn't want Jesus to be in any part of the story, let alone the center of it. You might even say he was the villain of the Christmas story. Someone who didn't want there to be a Christmas story at all. His name was King Herod. King Herod was a ruthless, brutal king. Picture the worst villain in any story you've ever heard and then multiply that by 1,000. That was King Herod. He killed anyone who tried to get in his way. He killed his father-in-law, his brother-in-law, a few of his 10 wives, and even 2 of his sons. Eventually, he killed thousands of innocent children trying to protect his position as king. Why? Because in King Herod's mind, the world revolved around him. In his mind, he was the most important person in the story, and he was going to do whatever it took to keep it that way. And that's where the story starts. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So, the Magi, also known as wise men, were really smart guys who usually became advisors to royalty. And they were looking for Jesus. They'd heard that the Savior had been born, the king their people had been waiting for, and they wanted to celebrate by worshiping him. But when they got to King Herod and delivered this news, his world was rocked. Asking Herod where they could find Jesus meant that an important prediction had come true. A new king had been born. But Herod had already given himself the title of King of the Jews. You can imagine how Herod's blood must have boiled when the Magi showed up and said they were looking for a different King of the Jews. Suddenly, Herod realized the story wasn't about him anymore, and that wasn't how he planned it. People were supposed to be worshiping and talking about him, not some baby. So what did Herod do? Well, he totally freaked out. Herod called a meeting with his council to make sure the news of Jesus' birth was true. And when they all told him it was, he hatched a plan. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." Of course, this was all a lie. Herod didn't want to put Jesus at the center of the kingdom. Herod wanted to remove Jesus completely. I told you he was a villain. But the Magi were wise and knew something wasn't right. God warned them in a dream not to report back to Herod. So when the Magi found Jesus, they didn't tell Herod about where he was. In fact, God told Joseph to take Mary and the baby Jesus out of town to protect them from Herod. So they hit the road too. But when Herod found out that the Magi had figured out his plan, he came up with another, even more terrible idea. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. That is just awful, right? Herod's selfish desire to stay in the center of the story was so intense that he was willing to be responsible for the death of hundreds and thousands of babies. He was willing to do whatever it took to keep the focus off Jesus and on him. You see, there are two very different responses to the news of Jesus' arrival into the world. The Magi saw the star pointing to Jesus, and they became overjoyed. Jesus was at the center of their thoughts and hopes, and it brought them great joy and happiness. But King Herod heard about the star pointing to Jesus and became angry and jealous. Herod saw Jesus as someone who might interfere with the plan he had for his own life. Jesus was a threat to everything Herod loved about his life, and he didn't like it one bit. And now, here we are over 2,000 years later, and I think it's still the same. No, I'm not saying we're anywhere near as bad or crazy as Herod was. That's just not possible. But what I am saying is that we all sort of have one of two responses to the holiday season. It's about us, or it's about Jesus. One response brings frustration and disappointment, while the other brings joy and celebration to our season. I don't know about you, but I'd prefer joy. You see, Jesus is the reason for the joy of Christmas. That's what the Magi taught us all those years ago. When it's about Jesus, we have a reason to celebrate. King Herod's focus almost caused him to erase the main character of the story. He placed himself at the center of his universe. He lived according to all his own desires, and it caused terrible problems in the story he was trying to write for himself. When the Magi were overjoyed with the news of the Messiah coming into the world, Herod was full of stress and jealousy. And when we make Christmas all about us, we're risking feeling the same way. Why? Because placing ourselves at the center of the story will cause us to miss what matters most. Think back to the Magi and Mary and Joseph. They were focused on Jesus, and because of that, they heard what God wanted them to do. Imagine what might have happened if they missed God's leading because their focus was somewhere else. I don't think we'd be singing Joy to the World if the story had gone that way. So what can we do to take the focus off of ourselves this Christmas and put it back on Jesus where it belongs? I think we can start with 2 simple steps. First, identify what you think about most during Christmas time. Is it presents, being off from school, eating tons of Christmas cookies and lemon pound cake? Think about whether the things that bring you the most joy during this Christmas season are about you or about Jesus. Second, change your focus to Jesus. When you find yourself centering Christmas on things other than Jesus, like hanging out with your friends, shopping for gifts, or decorating the tree, switch your focus. It's totally fine to get excited about all the fun things that happen during Christmas season, but it's important that we don't lose sight of the true reason to celebrate, Jesus. So when you start getting wrapped up in other things, Take that opportunity to spend some time journaling, praying, singing worship songs, or reading your Bible. Simple things like that can help you shift your focus away from yourself and onto God. When Jesus is at the center of the story, when he's the reason for the happiness we feel, we make room for more joy in our lives. We have hope. We have something solid to celebrate, no matter what else is happening around us. We feel less disappointment when the presents aren't all under the tree, or our holiday break isn't as exciting as we had hoped, or the things with our families get a little stressful. We still have the joy of Christmas because our focus won't be on ourselves, but instead on God. Jesus is the reason for the joy of Christmas. So, what's one thing you can do to help keep your Christmas about Jesus this year? Trust me when I tell you that when you keep your eyes on Jesus, you definitely won't miss out on the joy of the season. I want you to think about this question. How might my Christmas be different if I focused on Jesus rather than myself? And while you're thinking about that question, I'm gonna go mail these.